Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is a very interesting young woman. Her name is Elizabeth Mikotowicz, and she is an artist, a fashion designer, a writer, and an activist. And she's got a very interesting story about painting murals. I'll just drop that for now, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Elizabeth, or Beth, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
You're very welcome. I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have. So, when you were younger, we always talk about, living half outside and half inside. We're bereft of the inner understanding and all that. And there are worlds inside, right? And we kind of get in touch with those as kids. What was your experience like? Because you've already noted in our previous conversation that you're really highly sensitive, maybe high functioning autism, things like that. Labels really don't matter. We're just super, super sensitive. And that's okay, right? It doesn't necessarily make us so different that we don't belong and need a label as evidence
or a diagnosis.
Exactly. So how did it begin, and what was it?
I was always a very imaginative kid, and from a young age, like, I knew I wasn't like the other kids. Like, I had a couple friends here and there, but like I was just kind of like a little weirdo off in my own little world. And I always had sleep issues, even from a very young age. Like, I would keep, 5 years old, I'd be keeping my mother up at like 2 a.m. because I just couldn't sleep. Or, when I finally did go to sleep, it would be, after, 18, 24 hours, and I'd finally crash. But I would have these intense, insane dreams, and like I loved the dreams where I could fly. That's why I loved being asleep. Like,
Aren't those really cool?
I rather would be asleep, because as a kid, I had such cool dreams, and I would fly to all these places and do all these cool things. And, it was very strange. And no one ever thought anything of it. And it's funny because my daughter kind of can do the same thing, and she would talk to spirits when she was little. And at the preschool I was at in Bangor, Maine, it's called Hilltop. Well, it used to be this old orphanage, and it went through the Spanish flu, or whichever plague was in like 1918 or something. And so the spirits of all these little kids are there, and I never wanted to play with the kids there. Like, I was always off with these little spirit kids. And I remember like telling my dad, like, they won't come home, like they never go home. And they just stay there, and
they just hang out, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. And it's somewhat rare, or has been, at least the openness in talking about it. It really takes some vulnerability to share those kinds of things, because to most adults it sounds really whacked, right? Because our world is not built on inner understanding, or understanding. The imagination may not be the imagination. That could be you operating on other planes of consciousness, which we now know about, right? Quantum theories have been presenting since, well, there was a quantum theory that came out in 2010 that posits that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. So
that's crazy.
I had the experience, a direct experience, of 9 planes of consciousness akin to the 9 dimensions, and aligning those in 1989. It was a process developed by William Swigard back in the 1950s. So these kinds of things are there. It's just most of us don't seek them out.
Right. I was like in denial. Like, I just, I experienced a sort of mental health issues, through puberty. Like, I went through these depressed episodes, and, there's issues going on, with my family, and, adoption, and, all that stuff. And
what was it like finding out you were adopted?
Oh, I always knew. Yeah, I always knew and I always wondered about it. And I actually ended up meeting my biological family when I was 18. And, even if you have a really good upbringing that isn't traumatic, isn't violent, there's always trauma with adoption. It just, it's that way. And
Yeah,
it
different
took
kinds.
me, yeah, whether it made not like physical, PTSD trauma, but,
No, the
emotional.
trauma is in unanswered questions,
Yeah.
right? And I had the same thing. I was orphan adopted as a kid, and that's what sent me inside. Is once I found out I was adopted, it was like the regular questions: why, who's my
Yeah.
biologicals, um, how did I get here, and am I loved, or all
Right,
that kind of
right.
stuff. But there was another question that I was led to, and I guess it must have been because I had some early church experience, but I questioned, hey, do I have a father and mother in heaven, and can I talk to them?
Right.
Sure enough, I could. Now, or something became available that was wise, mentoring, warm, loving, always giving the right data, if you will.
Right.
But you got to ask the right questions first.
Yeah.
So is that
Well,
kind of your experience? Did you find, because of that, did you look into that next level communication beyond
yep.
this world?
I well, see, I didn't think there was anything special about me. I just thought I had, maybe
Yeah, I
mental
really do.
health
It's like, hey,
issues. So
I can do this. Everybody else can too, right?
right, right. And, it wasn't till I right before I moved to Illinois when I was 18, I started having dreams every night about, body bags being, hauled out of my cousin's house. Well, the first 3 weeks I got there, it was a domestic violence situation. She ended up stabbing him. And so that was my first, like, oh my God, that was like a premonition, like dream. Like
Mhm.
I literally had that. I never have repetitive dreams, but I did with that. And I just knew something bad was going to happen. And that's when I was first like, okay, maybe I should like start listening to, that gut feeling. And
Start paying attention.
yeah, but then,
But how do you
life,
do that, right? When you're in
right,
that situation, you have these dreams, they're about people that you know, and you know that there's nothing that you can control. You're just being given information. Well, what do you do with it? How do you handle it?
right,
You process that kind of thing, especially if that pattern continues to repeat with others.
right.
This is like, it can be really challenging. How did you deal with it?
Well, I didn't know exactly how to deal with it. I found out I was pregnant out there, and I got pregnant with my daughter, and her father got into meth and started, beating the crap out of me because I was pregnant and super sick with her. I couldn't really defend myself.
Mhm.
And, that was the start of, my life going right to hell. And, ended up leaving him. That was like not like that just wasn't an issue after a certain point. But when I got with my daughter's father, he was like my daughter's father, he was like fighting a girl that could beat me up. Like it's not like he could really hurt me, but like he was still stronger than me, and especially when I was pregnant. But when I got with my son's father, he'd hit me once and I'd be in the hospital, with my skull showing. And,
Mhm.
this was, I didn't do drugs before that. Like I like my weed and beer, and that was fine with me. And, you know, after that head injury, the doctors, gave me opioids. And when I tried to refuse, they threatened me with child protective services because I was pregnant. And they said that it put the baby at risk. And I'm like, yeah, now that I know what I know about opiates, like I'm still mad about that. I know I need to like woosah and let it go, but I'm still mad about that.
Well, the
It
whole
just
pharmaceutical world is built on profit over people and
right,
planet. It's not about people. It's about the profit.
exactly.
And unfortunately, because it
And
really
they
turns
got us all
medicine on its
addicted.
head.
Right. And they got us all addicted. And the rehabs, they have a 94% failure rate. My friend got kicked out because he drank a cup of coffee in the wrong area of the rehab. They kicked him out for that. No refund, $30,000, and they just filled that seat right after they kicked
That
somebody
sounds a
out.
little extreme. There had to have been a bit more, that if this was a story from him, that there's always two sides, right?
Right, but
and I
they
will
have a
say
lot.
that people in rehab don't tell the truth,
That is true, but
right? They hide themselves in, and often blame others in situations, because that's one of the reasons they're there. They don't take responsibility for their own behavior.
true, but jails and rehabs have very petty rules. Like,
I'm sure they probably do.
you're getting nailed to the ground because you brought a packet of ketchup from your cell. I've watched this happen to people because
Right.
they brought a ketchup packet to the dining hall because you're not supposed to bring anything in or anything out. Like, that's harmless. Like, leave people alone. Like, you don't like, and so like I've just seen too
One
many
would
petty.
think, however, in the stream, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just saying that I can see how the means of controlling environments can be so strict and prohibitive because the kind of people that they're dealing with, right? And from that perspective, they're wanting to maintain order and be in control, because oftentimes what happens in the prison body, if you will, is far beyond the guard's control.
Yes and no, but that's a very big motive for, they tell you when you sign the paperwork at rehab, it's no refunds if you get kicked out. That is a very big motive to just kick people out, one after the other,
especially with private security,
right,
or private prisons and private rehabs and all of that tied in again to the profit system. So I hear what you're saying,
right.
and that's just wrong. Now, how do we deal with that? Which is kind of what you eventually got into. And before we get that, so in this process, you, as I understand it, you had some challenges in maintaining your health and well-being, as far as your safety, your security, place to live, which got you, because of the doors that were closed to you for whatever reasons, you had to go elsewhere and find something instead, right? It wasn't your first choice or even second choice. It was just a matter of, this is all I got right now. And he ended up in a bad situation and got caught and spent some time because of it. Now, while you were in, you began to find yourself again and restore that inner being. How did you do that? What began that process?
Well, it kind of all depended on which institution I was at, because some of them I was, just fighting to keep my sanity. I mean, the horrible things that they do to women in there, I mean, it's absolutely unreal. I was still under the illusion of white supremacy, that, everything was good now and that everyone's treated equal. And, there are no, there is no class system, by race in this country. And it wasn't until, they locked me up that
necessarily so.
Right now, but then when I got locked up and I saw it for what it was, and I saw what was still happening and how they're still committing genocide against certain groups, that was really awful to watch. I hated watching women die, for no reason other than someone's got an authority complex, or, they just don't want to do their job. And so I started writing. There was a style of art that I got into called Zen Tangle art, and it's like doodle art, but it's meditative.
Well, I like the Zen part anyway.
Yeah. And I started doing that because I had to distract myself from my trauma, because it literally got to the point where I was having PTSD flashbacks so bad I was hallucinating. It didn't help that they were, forcing me to take all these medications that weren't helping me, that it was for a wrong diagnosis, and just every
well, it had to be really just messed up in that they're trying to get you to be somebody completely different than who or what you were, and
They weren't
that
trying.
natural you was fine. Well, with
Well,
the
yeah, but
treatments, and I understand that maybe it didn't seem like that, but with the types of diagnoses and the drug treatments and things like that, that's
telling
surprising.
someone to kill themselves in solitary isn't treatment, it's abuse.
Well, my point, exactly. Right. That's what I'm saying. The drugs, the treatment, the control mechanisms,
Right.
and the rampant misuse of power.
Yeah.
What did you do about it? How did you work through it? Two questions. First, how did you find solace within through the artwork that you discovered? And then we'll take it to the next level. I won't ask that question yet.
So my art would distract me because, you know, with my neurodivergence, like it's very hard for me to move on to the next, you know, thing. You know, if especially like with racing thoughts and trauma, it'll just like go right back to the beginning. And so
You're right.
I had to
High
learn.
spectrums are OCD but exponentiated.
Yeah, and so I had to find a way to distract myself, you know, because talking about it wasn't doing anything. It was re-traumatizing me, and it was giving people ammo to use against me. So I just, you know, didn't want to do that. So the art would, yeah, like I said, the art would distract me. And I'm also working on my own Zentangle coloring book for adults, and I'm putting down a whole bunch of like trauma coping mechanisms that really helped me. And
Awesome. That's a great way to share what you learned so that you can help others. We don't want to go down the roads like you've been through, and yet that's still happening. And as long as it is, when you can lend a hand to others who are coming out of it, that's just super.
Yeah, I'm trying. But I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question?
I hadn't asked you yet. I was asking how you got involved with the art. What kind? So the Zentangle,
Oh, yes,
it's
I
like
did.
doodling, but is it?
Yep.
Is it sense? You know, I'm
You
getting
pick,
the
you
thought like
pick.
it's like automatic drawing or something like that.
Yeah. So you can, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can like, the first, the easiest, most generic way is just draw like a couple scribble lines. And, you know, on every segment, you pick a pattern from the book and you just draw that pattern. And then you go to a different section and you pick a different pattern, and then you see what you have at the very end. But you can do this with like regular coloring books and regular drawings. And that's what I started to do in, you know, when I was in there. I would, you know, like draw like a rose or something and then do the Zentangle art like in the rose. And so it's like you don't have to be good at art or drawing or anything. It's just simple little patterns.
Well, it's allowing your creative side to come out, because this is what gets thwarted with all this activity, that you know, natural being, creative spark that you have, that we all have, gets diminished, and you feel a little helpless and trying to find it again.
And the spiritual experiences that you do have is terrifying. You know, I remember being, you know, beyond intoxicated and thinking I died and gone to hell because I was seeing these shadow people, you know, all over the place. And I was hearing conversations that later on I found out were actually happening. But it was weird because I was so intoxicated, and I thought the person was like somewhere in the house and I just couldn't find them. And come to find out, they weren't there, obviously, but these conversations really did happen. Like I just found out later on, you know, and it was, yeah. So I've always had this theory that, you know, amphetamines like meth and, you know, all that stuff, like it can create a spiritual opening, just more on a very demonic side, a very dark side.
I'm having a challenge with considering that to be spiritual. Because
well, demons are supernatural beings.
My understanding of spirituality, the core of the understanding of spirituality, is everything is connected. Starts there. Now, the individual experience, which is outside of that realm, because in that area where your life is not congruent with the natural order that.
I think spiritual is the wrong word, supernatural. Because it was a
Sure,
supernatural experience.
that fits a little bit beyond, because it is, or maybe just paranormal.
Yeah.
And that would mean that, there are other energies, there are things that, depending on where our energy is, it's like the law of
Right.
attraction. What your attention, your intention, your actions are, that's what you're going to attract. And when you're in a diminished condition, all you're going to do is beat up on yourself, and you're going to expect everybody
Right.
else to. That's the core essence of that feeling like you're less than, right?
Right.
Not only are you taught that, you eventually believe that. And because you believe that, then you begin attracting all the energy that proves it to you, because that's your belief. Now, can you change your belief? How did you change your belief? And what happened as a result?
Well, I was kind of like, I had to like rewire my brain literally, because
Mhm.
you know, even when I got out and I was talking to, like, I started talking to state reps about, you know, getting bills passed, you know, at first I was like down on myself, like, why would they listen to me? Like, you know, I'm just a felon, recovering, you know, addict, you know, why would they
That's
listen
my
to me? And
point.
then
You
I
put in a
changed.
box and you diminish yourself, and
Right.
you don't let yourself come out of that box, because you've trapped yourself in the box. When there's
Right.
something that needs to be done, then you step up and go do it like you did. So how did
Right.
that process happen?
Well, I changed my thinking, you know, to why wouldn't they listen to me? You know, I'm their failed statistic. I've seen every crack in their system and why it doesn't work and why it's destroying everybody. You know, I saw it, I got dragged through it. So, you
Mhm.
know, why wouldn't they listen to me? And, you know, come to find out, most of them up on, you know, from their ivory towers really don't know. They really don't have a clue what the problem is and where the issues are, because they
And
can't see
unless you
it.
have a direct experience of it, you never will. You can understand
Exactly.
in theory, and if you meet someone that can articulate it well enough so that you can lead them down the logic path, and use critical thinking and expose all these different things that, gosh, that just doesn't sound or feel right, right? Because the
Right.
mistreatment, the abuse, the manipulation, all those kinds of things. So you've got some ears listening to you. How did that feel?
It felt good. It felt really empowering. And it felt like, you know, maybe all that hell I went through and put myself through is, you know, at the end of the day, I had to realize I was addicted to the trauma, because, you know,
Mhm.
it's not that I liked it. It's not that I enjoyed it. It was that I could not sit with peace and be like, oh, okay, everything's fine. I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And being in the midst of chaos was easier for me than to wait for it to happen. And so that's what I had to, you know, face and, you know, deal with. And I don't
Let me
know.
ask you a question. Do you think that in the midst of that chaos, that there's patterns that you haven't recognized yet that cause it to feel so?
Absolutely. I'm still working on myself. I'm not standing here saying, up, I'm completely cured and I am like enlightened. I'm so far from like enlightenment, and like I'm still on a healing journey. Like I'm still working on it
Some
every
people think
day.
I am. I'm human. We're
Right.
working on myself, and I do it on a daily, moment to moment basis. I think we all do once we start on that path. It's
Yeah.
never ending, right?
Yeah.
It's the journey, right, that
Yeah.
brings those synchronicities, the serendipitous moments that, like you had, in finding your way toward the legislators or the people to talk to get the bills written. First of all, how is that? What synchronicities did you notice? Because I want you to pay particular, and you may not have yet, as of yet, looked at it from this angle. What do you remember were the unexpected benefits or gifts that were offered to you along the way because of your tenacity in getting this work done?
Um,
Did you
Well,
understand the question?
I don't know if I got,
Okay.
really any. I guess I'm just happy that, women
How did
don't
the
have.
meeting take place? What process
Oh,
did
oh,
you
oh,
have
oh.
to go through, and what were the little things that kind of came in unexpectedly
Oh, okay.
that greatly benefited the process?
So this is actually really kind of a funny story. So I got super angry and literally called the police station up and like cussed them out for not charging this officer. Um, and it was the DA, the cops and the DA, because there was this cop up in Calais who gave a high school student drugs to give to her mother, who was sexually gratifying him for the drugs. So this man, 30 years on the police force, fully understands addiction, well versed in
Mhm.
that, is extorting this woman and involving her child in it. And I was like, he needs to be charged with a sex crime. He's abusing his authority, all that stuff. But the way the
Sure.
law is written, there was nothing he could do. But he told me to write to the legislature, because he's like, you've made a lot of good points, and I never would have thought of any of that, if you hadn't, and I'm going to consider this for sentencing, because you're right, it is extortion, and it should be. I'm like, the level of authority that cops have over civilians, like, why are cops getting sexually gratified on taxpayers' money anyway? So I ended up writing to a bunch of the legislatures, and they want to put I wrote 3 things out, like if a cop uses his badge to, try and, get that from a woman, like, that.
Well, it's aggression, right?
Right.
This is what
You have a position of
the peace
authority.
movement that I'm part of, that I'm executive director of now. We have two premises, or two principles. It's a philosophy: live and let live. The live is a moral principle: be an excellent human. We can unpack that as to the different ways we can do
Right.
that, talk about it, discuss it, and find activities to engage each other in doing so. The other side of it, the legal principle, is don't aggress. And our long-term
Right.
vision is to remove all aggression from the law, which would put in place these kinds of put in place safeguards for
Right.
what you experienced and what the woman experienced.
Yeah, and well, oh, sorry, my dog's shaking the table. But I proposed a bill saying, cops should be the same as correctional officers. There's no such thing as consent. The level of power and authority they have over us, it's just not fair. And as a woman who's already been to prison, like, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is, what am I going to jail for when I say no? Like, that's the only
Right.
thing I can. And so that one's
And that
still,
is just sad. I mean, to
yeah,
imagine, and this, people might hear this and say, well, well, it does. And it happens regularly, and the voices are squashed because they can be done so because the authority that's present.
and then this I was part of a women's group called the Beautiful Heart Ministries. My friend created this whole trauma course, and now she has a nonprofit with that, helping women who've been incarcerated and all that stuff. And she encouraged me to, keep doing this, because I'm always making these arguments, calling my local politicians out, for their crap, with the state reps. And she's like, well, what about what happened to you? They wouldn't give you your paperwork. And this is how they bury abuse in these institutions. And it's not even just, prisons. It's, colleges, it's the military, all that stuff. I filed a PREA complaint against Somerset County, and they wouldn't. They sent the result back to Alderson, which is where I was being housed when I filed the complaint. Alderson wouldn't even allow me to hold, that complaint in my hand. They read it to me, and then they said I couldn't have a copy of it. If you don't have proof
But this
that you
was a
made,
complaint that you wrote
yes, that I
and,
filed.
didn't make a comment or a copy of. So once it left your hands, you were screwed.
Yeah. And so I asked for, well, it
No
didn't
pun
matter,
intended.
because I could have, photocopied it, but, they could have just say, oh, well, we never got it or whatever. But they responded. This was with the response and everything. They wouldn't allow me to have it. And then when I got out, 4 officers and the captain all got convicted of raping and stalking inmates and tampering with PREA evidence. they had been covering, you know, there were women that went through way worse than what I did. And, you know.
So what I hear you saying is that your activity had something to do with that, your whistleblowing, so to speak.
No, they're whistleblowing. The girls that got sexually assaulted, like
I thought you
brutally
were.
sexually assaulted. No, I had no part in that. I'm still trying
Well,
to
that's
track down.
fortunate.
Yeah, I'm still trying to track down my paperwork from Somerset County. I went to the Freedom of Information Act. They couldn't find it. Like Somerset County, when I got out, I asked them for a copy. They said, we already gave it to you. If you want a copy of it, you're going to have a lawyer subpoena it. First of all, by law, they have to give it to me. There's just no consequence if they don't. And I never got it. No, you gave it to Alderson, and Alderson wouldn't allow me to have it. And so they told me to get a lawyer and subpoena it. Well, you can't subpoena anything without an open case, and you can't open a case without the paperwork. So they know that.
What a catch-22. And so the system's just.
Yeah. So I'm proposing a bill that they get fined like $500 a day for every day they stonewall an inmate, because this is how they bury abuse. Like, that would never happen on the outside. You would be allowed to get a copy of a complaint that you filed, but because we're inmates and we're low quality women that have been thrown away, you know, it doesn't matter. And it's like, you know, 70% of the women in prison in America have some form of domestic violence or sexual assault in their history. Like, we are the women that slipped through the cracks and that society failed.
So how did this affect you internally? What kinds of things did you go through within yourself and ascend from, and how did you ascend into a better place?
Well, at first I got super paranoid because this county is really corrupt. Like, they're dirty, like on a whole lot of levels. And I got super paranoid and wouldn't come out of my house because I thought they were gonna have me set up, and you know, it brought a lot of trauma.
See how that might happen, right?
And yeah, and then, you know, as I got more and more, you know, allies in the political community, I told them what was going on, and they're like, don't worry, we've got you, we won't let them do that to you. And it was a much bigger community outside of Somerset, so that made me happy.
Well, all you want to do in any of those locations, okay, so you got caught, you're doing your time. However, you ought to be able to do your time in a semi-safe environment without.
Well, don't call it rehabilitation if all you're going to do is abuse people and sexually assault them. That's my thing. And I don't want to sit here and say that, you know, all cops are bad, because honestly, for, you know, every cop.
There's great ones we both know, and those who have gone beyond the call of duty and serving.
Right.
People,
you know,
and actually pay attention to the protect and serve, right? That's what they're really about. And make the majority of them are, because there's just those few.
No, it's not the majority. The majority of them are bad. But, you know, the ones that are literally risk their job trying to protect me from officers that were literally, you know, wanting to hurt me. I had officers coming and telling me, please be careful. Please just stay in your cell. These officers want to hurt you. If you give them a reason, they are going to hurt you. And, you know, they defend me when I get written up for, you know, dumb stuff, you know, even doing the right thing. I got written up for doing the right thing. I had an extra sock. You're only supposed to have 3 pairs or whatever. I turned the extra pair in, and they wrote me up for having too many pairs of socks. That's the kind of petty stuff that, you know, and which got me, you know, put in solitary.
Man, I can't imagine what that, and I'm sure our viewers, it's just that sounds so surreal for most people, and yet you went through it, and I'm sorry you had to do that. In coming out of that, what did you notice, again, internally, that shifted in you, that gave you the inspiration and the power to continue to address it and not become another statistic?
I was kind of angry and defiant. Like because I had one of the sergeants there, you know, telling me to kill myself when I was on, you know, medication that was making me suicidal. Like, I just wanted so bad to prove these people wrong. Like, she on an, right, or request that I wrote, she says, I can't wait for you to get out and overdose and stop wasting taxpayers' money. Like, I just wanted to prove these people wrong so badly, and, you know, be okay for my kids, and just, you know what joy and happiness and peace was like. Like, I just wanted peace so bad. Like, I got so sick of accepting, you know, constant chaos and violence and just tragedy after tragedy. And like, I just didn't want that anymore. And when I got out, like, I blocked everybody that was, you know, a part of that life. Like, I stopped hanging out with anybody that got high. Like, yeah, I love you, but I'm not. Like, I just became a complete loner. And you know, I learned to be okay with that. And
Sometimes you need to be safe and secure,
yeah,
and you know,
right.
and keep your sanity for a while. Now, as you spent time alone and developing your relationship with self, how did you then begin to expand into your surroundings, and what kind of relationships did you begin to develop, and how did you do that from that place of being better to yourself?
Well, you know, I was just being put on all these different medications when I got out, and none of them were working. And I remember one morning I was just like, you know, like I was telling you earlier, like, I swear if I could just go see a shaman, I'd feel better. And then my mother takes me to this, you know, witchy, you know, spiritual psychic fair. And I sat with a psychic, and she said, you don't have mental health issues. You're a witch and a very powerful empath, and your energy is all messed up from trauma and, you know, bad places you've been. And yeah, like some of those institutions were really badly haunted.
Right.
Like,
Right.
very badly haunted.
Now there is also, if I may offer, there's the notion that we have to go through those trials and tribulations in order to fully step into the power and the being that we were meant to be, because we couldn't really do it otherwise, right? Because we didn't have the experience, you wouldn't have to grow from it. So in that growth, there's a tremendous opportunity as well. So I applaud you for taking that opportunity and making the right or better choices for you that continue to happen, right? You're just still in the embryonic state of this process, right?
Right. Yeah, still healing, still long way from where I want to be. But, you know, I can wake up every morning and say, like, I like my life. Like, I feel happy. I feel good. Like, I'm like at peace. And, you know, that was just such a foreign concept to me, like peace. Like, even when I got out and it was over, like, just because you get out and it's over doesn't mean, you know, it's over.
No, there's a whole nother set of fears of what the hell am I going to do? Right.
Yeah. And, you know, I was really lucky because, you know, the governor changed and it expanded main care. So I was able to continue therapy, to continue like treatment, going to the doctor, and being able to take care of myself. And, you know, that just made all the difference in the world. And, you know, being the only country that doesn't have universal health care, like, I mean, I was in prison with a 78-year-old little grandma, cutest little lady. Her husband was a vet and she needed knee surgery to walk. And her insurance wouldn't pay for it because she was married. So she lied on the paperwork and said she was single. You know, Trump wants to cry about a raid. They blew her door off the hinges, put guns in that little old lady's face. Like, she was the sweetest grandma, never did nothing her whole life. Like, and I'm so sick of, you know.
Well, there had to have been at least something that triggered them. But still,
No,
you know, a 75-year-old
yeah,
woman.
it was insurance fraud. Yes, it was
Oh my
insurance
gosh.
fraud. But you don't need to come in and, you know, scare her to death. And
That's
you know,
overkill.
yeah.
That's just way overkill.
But they do that, you know, all the time because her husband had guns, you know. Like, you're really gonna
Not that I'm in favor of that, but I can see the error on the side of caution. However, when you're in that situation and you're not trained for it, because I think a lot of these guys and gals, they never really go through the proper training to remain centered, calm, not
Right.
up in the adrenaline of the moment and making bad choices as a result. Because
Right.
that,
They expect us to remain perfectly calm when they have, a whole bunch of guns, pointed at us. And it's like, are you kidding me?
we're in control. Why don't you? Right. Yeah, that just doesn't make any sense. So how did you finally find your way into this new level of happiness? What happened? How did you, piece those Zen tangles together to
Right.
create a life for yourself?
Well,
Or
our situation changed. We moved and our housing became completely stable, like never have to worry about it again. And that was like a complete, relief, and just getting away from, where I got in trouble, and,
now, did
a
you,
new
in order
start.
to do that, because I'm thinking about how others might be in a similar situation to you and the questions they might ask of, okay, how did you do this? What kinds of things? Was this a state-oriented thing? Was this a
So
HUD housing? Was it part of the rehab program? How were you able to manifest
no,
this?
my fiance got a new job and we moved.
Oh,
So
that helped.
that really helped. And this place has a lot more money going through it than Maine does. So, my brand's getting a lot more exposure, and there's just, more
Your brand. We
opportunity.
haven't talked about your brand. What
Oh yeah.
is your brand?
So over the pandemic, this is one of my shirts, by the way. I found a company that turns your art into environmentally friendly clothes. And so, like, I have bags, I have dresses, I have everything, and it comes in plus sizes. So, like, I'm all about inclusivity, and they're sized properly. Like, we have skinniness and vanity shoved down our throats, and a lot of these clothing brands will make their clothes really, really small, and it can create a lot of body dysmorphia issues.
Yeah, I bought
and
some shirts from China that were like 3 sizes too small, and they were triple X's.
Right. But people with,
And I wear a medium.
eating disorders. Oh wow. Yeah, but like people with eating disorders, like that's gonna affect them. That's gonna, trigger and I'm just so glad it doesn't do that, because I would never want to contribute to people's mental health issues. Like, this is a pillowcase. Like, there's something for everybody in here. Like, one day I will paint something completely gothic, and then the next day it'll be like moons and butterflies and rainbows and
Or gothic to
all that.
etheric, huh?
Right.
Oh, cool.
But
Congratulations on being
thank you.
able to turn your life around and take tragedy and turn it into triumph.
I started making gratitude lists too, to like raise
All
my
important.
vibration and distract me. And there's these things called binaural beats. It's like sound healing. I sleep with those on and I meditate with them. They also have guided meditations on YouTube that, I found really helpful. And I thought,
You mentioned the binaural beats. I actually have one. It's called the multi-plane awareness technique. And for listeners, if you just plug in multi-plane and solfeggio, SOLFEGGIO, the very first video that comes up is a meditation, a guided visualization that I put together based on that 13 or it's a 9-plane integration of your being.
oh wow.
I was introduced to it in 1989. It was work done by William Swigard in the 1950s. He discovered a way to create a light body. It's kind of like an astral experience, only a little more refined. You create your light body, put your consciousness into it. It's facilitated, so you've got a person leading you through it. And then you move that light body throughout 9 planes of consciousness and integrate your body on each one of those planes.
That's amazing.
And then drop them back off on your way back in. So I couldn't
Definitely
find an
must try
audio
that.
version of it. So I created one without any effects. And then a few years later, I put binaural beats and solfeggio tones behind it. So it's really
That's amazing.
cool.
I'm definitely gonna look that up. Yeah, those are really helpful. And also, like when you're really stressed out, ASMR, for especially for you neurodivergents, like it feels like you're getting a massage, and just the different, like the noises are like so active. Like it feels like I'm getting a scalp massage when you know when I listen to them. And yeah, you know, just stay positive. Also, for those of you who have, you know, addiction disabilities, or they call them disabilities, I think they're more superpowers, but that diagnosis, there's something called vocational rehab. They gave me business advisors. They gave me yeah, they taught me how to make a business plan. Like they gave me a financial advisor. I got a $10,000 grant, you know, because they helped me get it. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I've never gotten this much money legally before.
Now, was that through the Small Business Development Association, or SBA, the Small Business Association, or did it come through, what's the other one? There's, well, you already answered the question, but those kinds of things, the grant, oh, the other organization I was going to mention was SCORE. They're in major cities all over the country, some even smaller cities, and they're a group of retired executives that are there that give free advice.
Oh, that's awesome.
To people like you. So they help you develop your business, take you through all the steps, ask you the right questions because they know what they are, right? Where you may not, because you're just going into something.
Right.
And it's a phenomenal resource. I actually taught marketing, social marketing classes for them for a number of years for LinkedIn. I wrote a LinkedIn workbook back in 2014. So yeah, I've done all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
You know, it's that creative thing. It's like you're always looking for something to do. You see something that needs to be done. You can't find any, you know, solutions or others who've done something. So I guess it's up to me to create it for myself. And I've been pretty good at being able to do that, and teaching high school, learning how to develop curriculum and how to work with adults, developmentally disabled adults, to, you know, high functioning autistics, and I love it. You know, I feel like I'm just part of the family, right? And I'm just able to offer that solace, kind of like you are finding in how you're building your business and working with people, and you're finding out all these kind-hearted others,
right,
who are similar to you.
Yeah. It's nice to like not like be on guard all the time.
That's a great feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
So let's look at that. So in order, because a lot of people are stuck in that fear of something, and oftentimes they can't even put the finger on what that fear actually is, but there's this tension they feel. There's a lack of trust in others, their environment, themselves even. How did you internally, do you remember what kind of emotional processing you went through, or intellectual processing? I mean, it all applies to your
you know, I'd have to calm myself down and be like, okay, yes, the danger might be present, but I know how to maneuver it. I know how to, you know, I'm gonna be okay. Also, I'll just be honest, weed helped me a lot. Like it slowed me down enough so I wouldn't react. And
point being, oftentimes we just need to slow down in order to move fast, because we get so much ahead, then we start thinking too much, we get obsessive, we get compulsive, and we make bad choices. And I would have to agree with you that, and it's not even necessarily a lot, there's just a little bit that seems to ease the tension just enough to allow you to be more present.
And I also, on days where I feel like I'm too anxious and I'm too triggered, I will cancel plans and I will take care of myself first, because I know I've done that. Oh, I'm not gonna, I'm too tough for that, or I can, you know, deal with it, or, you know, whatever. I know that eventually a burnout's going to come. And when I burn out, I tend to take everything around me with it. So like, and it's not rational, it's not, you know, on purpose, but, you know I have to take care of myself first. And that means eating properly. You know, I had to cut out all processed foods. You know, once I really started
Good for you.
meditating, once I started meditating and like getting on an actual definite spiritual path, like I couldn't eat all the same things that I used to, like, you know, and a lot of meats would make me feel sick. And if I, you know, stuff with artificial, you know, dyes in it will make me manic and not be able to sleep, and, you know, all that stuff. And I really had to start.
Bodies are really pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
Now, and you're becoming aware of it now. You weren't before, so you're just stuffing the crap in, right? And just like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. You know, the advertising, you know, McDonald's, and even unfortunately, I think a lot of people are looking for Mc enlightenment, and they're bypassing the real tough inner work that needs to take place. And you know, ultimately, do you find the inner work all that tough, or was it pretty easy once you figured it out?
The inner work is great, you know, and I've always noticed that my sleep patterns and my emotions fluctuate with the moon, with moon cycles, you know. And so I started, you know, following the moon, and it was always a constant in my life, you know, no matter if I was on the streets or, you know, in an institution or in an abusive relationship, like the moon was always there and always comforted me. So during the new moon, where it's that growing energy, you know, I will write out all my goals and what I'm trying to manifest and what I'm looking forward to and what I want my life to be like. And then when the full moon hits, I will write down things I want to release, like toxic traits or insecurities or traumatic memories that I'm trying to process and release. And, you know, that's how I kind of, you know,
I'm smiling broadly right now because I have a very dear friend. He's on the other side now. His name's Willie Whitefeather. He's a mixed blood Cherokee storyteller, and just a wonderful human being. He's probably 20 years my senior, maybe even more than that. And he says one time, you know, that about the moon cycles every 14 days, right? That there's this shift that takes place, and you've picked it up naturally because it's a natural process. You know, we have missed the Gregorian calendar has totally circumvented natural rhythms and cycles.
Right.
The a friend of mine, Jose Arguelles, years ago presented the idea of going back to a lunar calendar, 28 days. Well, it kind of makes sense because everything is
the patriarchy did that. The patriarchy did that because originally there was 28 days a month and there were 13 months in the lunar year. And the patriarchy said, oh no, that's the number of the divine feminine, so we're going to demonize it and, you know, make Christianity
This is how the Mayans calendar is set up. The Zolkin is set up, the Baktun, I think, is the long count, but it's based on the lunar cycles, you know. And every year, because there is one day off, they have a Day Out of Time festival on July 25th, right? And so there's this release to the nothingness, right, from which everything comes ultimately. We still don't recognize that yet, but that's what some people from elsewhere have told us, that we as humans don't understand that. And we don't understand that we live half inside and half outside yet, because we're bereft of the inner understanding or experience. And yet the experiences you're talking about that I've mentioned a few times, this is the bridge where you make the without as the within, because you've discovered what's inside first.
Right.
And then you start by doing so, then you begin to attract the outer world that reflects that. Now, point being, prior to that, you were still attracting the outer world that reflected your inner condition. You just were unaware of it.
Right.
So ultimately, we have personal responsibility for creating our lives.
Yep.
Right? Oh, that's scary. right? You mean,
Yeah.
you mean Joe's not responsible, Mary's not responsible? No, you're responsible. It's how you think, where or not think, and where you put your attention, intention, and interaction towards.
Right. Once, and my life has gotten so much better now that I've learned how to put my attention towards other things, what I want to happen, not what I don't want to
You're
happen.
afraid of happening.
Right. I mean, I'm so powerful. I manifested some of my worst nightmares. Like,
Good for
I don't
you, right?
ever want to go
Now
through
you
that
can
again.
only go up, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, and that's, finding that humor, that lightheartedness, that really makes a world of difference in the experience, because we got to be able to laugh at our silly
Yeah.
humor.
I always say that laughter makes the pain go down easier. That's like something I've said for years.
Well, as long as you're dealing with the pain. What about, getting rid of that pain? What do you have to do? What have you found works for you to help you eliminate it, get through it first, and then be able to dissipate that pain in the healing process of the trauma? Is it a process that you go through, or is it just a choice you make to let go and refuse to give it rental space in your head?
Right. Well, I think of it as like if I can make these changes and prevent it from happening to others, then that hell I drag myself through and others drag me through will be worth it in the end.
Mm.
And, if I can make it, for something and not for nothing, then, there's still stuff that, haunts me and I still have a hard time with. And, I don't know.
So what's going on with you in that point? Can you forgive yourself? Or is it that kind of thing where you just haven't been able to forgive yourself of whatever belief you have that you were out of line or did something out of character?
I mean, I just wish things hadn't gone the way they had. Like it was out, external forces. Like,
No, but you can't control it, right?
right. I
You
know.
did.
I know.
What
I
you
know.
can,
And it's like,
can you go back and change it now? No.
no, you can't.
However, what you can do is change how you think and feel about it.
Right.
Right. And you can begin to let go of those things. So just look, and you can recall, okay, when I first looked back at this, I felt this way and I was all just bungled up inside, right? Then the more you look at it, the more distance you get from it, the more you process it verbally and talking about it, not from the point of putting responsibility for it on something else, the more it will dissipate and eventually disappear as far as the charge you carry from it. Right. How did that process, how do you, because I'm sure I mentioned, I kind of described this process. That's what you've been going through, though, whether you realize or not, from what I'm hearing you say. How did you find ways to articulate that process as you understand it to others in order to help them?
Well, I would write. I'm in the editing process of my memoir, so like I definitely write.
Memoirs at 36. I mean, come on.
It's just a section of my life that was
I just
interesting.
because Jim Morrison never had any memoirs, and he had left some pretty good things that he had to say about stuff. And there are many others. Please don't die young. You have a lot of things to accomplish yet.
No, I'm doing it because I want people to see like what really goes on in there, and the money they're making and the level of corruption that's going on in this country. Like I want to expose that, so maybe others don't have to go through it, and maybe we can put an end to it.
Eventually, I think it is possible. I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe the innate nature of human beings are to love and be loved. That's what we seek. And because we don't seek it in each other, or we don't feel it in ourselves, first of all, we're afraid of exposing ourselves and being rejected, right? You're not going to like me if you really know who I am, kind of thing. And that sets up a whole, you know, major kerfuffle. And then being able to move beyond that in accepting self and recognizing that there is that connectivity that, when we are open to it, brings us the tools, the people, places, and things we need to ascend basically at the speed of surrender, which happens to be a title of one of my books, right? But this is how I've gone through it, as you have, right? You were in a very deep, dark place, and now you feel like you have ascended into a new order. And even though it's been incremental and it seems, you know, you got a long way to go, you still are in that process of ascension from where you were. And how'd you do that? You surrendered to what needed to be done.
Right. And there were times I felt like I was battling my old personality because I was trying to like.
You were, because you were. You know, right?
Yeah.
Old habits. As you're changing habits, you're going to be arguing with yourself.
Yeah. And it was like, I can, you know, make this decision and, you know, get justice, you know, in the streets, but I will be stepping back into a life that, you know, I won't be able to step back out of. You know, the only reason I stepped out of it before was because I went to prison and I got away from my, you know, all these people. But, you know, if
is that a belief, or do you, or could you believe that there's a way to deal with that in a way that doesn't affect you adversely or put you inside a harmful energy?
No. No.
Could it? Is it possible?
No, it's
not. Could you stretch your imagination? But let's have a little creative spark here, right? If that were possible, could you let it happen? Would it be comfortable? Imagining anything is possible to those who believe, right? Anything. So this, dream big. If that were possible, would you be able to allow yourself to go into that without putting your own bias back into it?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay. At least this will begin the process of you recognize, because now you're aware that other things are possible, and according to what you know to be true in yourself,
right,
there's magic that happens, right, beyond things you do, because you are making the effort to change and to make others' lives better and things like that. Well, the universe is going to support that, because that's loving and being loved, right? So that energy is prevalent in that. So just consider that you may be able to be free of that angst and be more diligent in the efforts with greater clarity, and people that actually have more expertise in operating in those realms to help you.
Yeah.
Could that happen? Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I've just like,
I'll be expecting a report.
Okay. Yeah, I really do want to get like the whole astral projection thing under control. That's like definitely a goal that I have.
What is it about that you need to control, you feel?
I can't do it on purpose, and when I do it, I get taken, I don't know, I just get taken to some strange places. Like I will literally scream in my sleep to wake myself up, like when I go to some of these scary places. And
well, you've been in scary places in real life, so those are going to be remnants in your unconscious world until you deal with them. And so they're going to be representing themselves to you, because this is the deeper levels of your consciousness you haven't addressed yet.
Right.
Right. And you understand that, I know, because you've dealt with some of that, and you do have an advanced understanding of paranormal activities because of your direct experience. Right. So being able to understand that, how would you consider a path to bringing that to greater order and being able to manage yourself and allow those OBEs to happen when they need to, not necessarily when you prescribe them to. Because these are gifts, right? And we got to be careful how we use those gifts, and they aren't necessarily meant for parlor tricks.
Right.
Although those happen too, right? There's another integrative purpose for that with other dimensions and things like that. We're just barely scratching the surface of dealing with this. I happen to have some experience with it because that's been my focus of study for the last 40 years. And I'm still an outlier in the realms that I hope to be. You know, you try to go into science and spiritual realms and consciousness realms and present things, and the listening's just not there yet.
Is it true you can't get into Area 51?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, because it's a military base.
Well, no. Like people who have tried to astral project, like they can't get in it. Everyone, like so, I mean, you're actually someone who can like control that stuff. Like,
I would.
Or have you not tried?
I haven't found it necessary. I deal with the guys all the time. I don't need to go into secret places or, you know.
Oh, right.
That kind of activity is not what I'm really interested in. Now, what I do know is that trained people like Lynn Buchanan and Ingo Swan and Robert Targ, what's his first name? Anyway, people that were developing the remote viewing program back in the 50s, they can go anywhere. And a practiced person can go anywhere. Doesn't matter.
So that's just the story.
And a willingness to let go of your preconceptions of not being able to do so.
Right.
Right. So those kinds of, you know, in consciousness, we're all energy anyway. So there are no limitations. There are no blockages. As long as you have the pureness of your intent and you're not there to, you know, because if you're trying to be malevolent, it's not going to work.
Right.
That's a higher level of frequency that doesn't allow the lower energies of all the, you know, ego stuff in it at all. So there's no malevolence even possible in the higher dimensions. So those kinds of things. Now in the astral plane on the 4th level, yeah, you can still, because there are people there who haven't worked through their stuff and they're mean and they're nasty and they're held there, and occasionally they bleed through into this, you know, because you've opened yourself up to them, and they're just looking for a place to have some fun.
Right.
Well, that can be taken care of as well. If you're open, honest, authentic, free, fearless, you know, the worst thing that can happen when you feel like somebody's trying to psychically attack you is to become fearful and try and resist it. Because that resistance is what they key on and build energy with, right? So an old friend taught me this: you just completely disappear, right? As much as you conceive that, you know, just disappear, breathe, let go, let them pass through. Usually what happens is you become a mirror and that energy is reflected back on them.
I feel like that's like my whole life.
Well, you know, this is a practice that there are old souls, I do know, and we have abilities and skills and things that we haven't even begun to tap into because we're not there collectively yet. There's not the listening that's available for it. Now, it appears that coming out of COVID, that listening level has been ramped up a little bit because there's more questions being asked, primarily because I think people got obsessed with the self-hygiene and sequestration, and who are they going to talk to?
Right.
If they're the only one around.
Exactly.
So you have all this self-talk going on. Hopefully it's good self-talk, or at least you're questioning your motives, your beliefs, your willingness to be or do, and then find a better way of living, or at least make a choice to at least consider those kinds of things. Because if you don't, you're going to fall back into the old patterns and habits and be just as miserable, if not more so, than you were before.
Right.
How did you find a way out of that? And what was it like in that initial realization that there was a freedom on the other side? I'm not speaking, that can be taken many ways, right? There's
Right.
freedom, and you don't have, I'm not talking about leaving your body
Right.
or dying and going to the other side. I'm talking about the other side of the trauma.
Right.
How did you find that, that tipping point?
Um, as I started, having these just people like attract into my life, like I noticed the kind of people that were coming into my life randomly just showing up versus the kind of people that would just randomly show up in my life. And, you know, it was to actually like make some traction with, what I was trying to do instead of just, trying to stay afloat and, have these big dreams and not know how to get there. Like once I started like actually making a little bit of progress, and once I really changed my mindset, like I talked about before, and I learned how to rewire my brain. Like when I tried to quit smoking, you know, whenever I light up, because I know if I just tried to quit, it's gonna build up and then I'm gonna freak out and I'm gonna end up doing it again anyway. But I literally told myself at the end of every cigarette, like, I hate this. This is disgusting. This smells so bad. This tastes so bad. Like I would just say these things, even though they weren't necessarily true. But, slowly, as the days went on, I found it more and more disgusting every time I
You were
lit up.
telling yourself. There's that illustrates my point just perfectly, right? Because you continued telling yourself stuff, you acquiesced to
Yeah.
that experience, or you surrendered to it because you told yourself enough to believe it. Now it's interesting, there's another aspect to telling yourself stuff over and over again and believing it to be true that's totally in the opposite direction. And Howard Bloom brought that out in his book called The Lucifer Principle, and it's about a scientific study of the history of how small groups of people have manipulated, how they have manipulated masses by
Right.
lies and controlling the media stream, whether it's a town crier or the internet.
Yep. And
And
just
people eventually
repeating the
believe it
same
to be true.
stupid story.
Right.
Yeah.
And people eventually believe it to be true because that's what they're being told. Well, the same applies.
Right.
That's what they're paying attention to, and it's repeated, so they're eventually going to believe it. The same applies with what you're telling yourself and how you eventually believe that in order to make the habit change. And it's just a perfect example. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, but I try to be cautious of my thoughts because I used to just, instead of being able to process my emotions, I would just, put it behind this wall of anger. And, to take down this wall of anger, it was very overwhelming. And, sometimes I felt like my brain was literally like splitting in half and
the anger is you end up seething inside.
Right. And, underneath all that anger is a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of fear. And, you're never just angry.
Right.
It's that your anger is the part of yourself that loves you and knows what's happening to you is wrong. But, there's always that other emotion, that core emotion along with it. And like once you have to find that core emotion, before you can really deal with, that anger. And, once I realized that and I stopped, feeding into it, like I'd process it, be like, yep, okay, like, yep, that's what I'm angry about. But, here's, what I'm really, what I should be focusing on. And, it makes things a lot easier. And I also kind of, I used to be, I still love metal. I still love metal music, but, I stopped listening to all of the songs that I associated my trauma with. Because let's face it,
memory triggers. Music is our memory triggers.
Yeah. There's so many songs that I love, but it was the songs that got me through some of the worst times in my life. And I hear them, all I'm going to think about is the worst times of my life.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
still
duh.
love him.
Why would you want to do that? Right.
Right.
And yet people will still continue to listen to the stuff that does that. You know, we had a gentleman does some work for my wife sometimes, and for 20 years he's worked for her, off and on, tuning her piano. And for 20 years he's had the same story that he carries in the not woe is me, but just the you know, unpleasant stuff that's going on in his life. And the unpleasant stuff has been a consistent issue with his ex, right? And I'm like, gosh, is he ever going to realize that he could change his story?
Right. Yeah. And I was tired of people writing my story for me. I was allowing it to happen. I was letting these men walk all over me. And then I put myself in a position where I didn't have power to write my own story. Mm-hmm. So once I got that back, you know, I know I had stuff I had to deal with. And, you know, I had to deal with my trauma before I even tried to deal with my addiction. I had to be on that treatment. And, you know, I don't think anyone should feel ashamed of that, because your brain, you know, when you have trauma or a mental health issue on top of addiction or chronic pain, like I was told
you need some chemistry, a little chemistry adjustment, and they do understand enough about brain chemistry that they can provide a temporary solution for that. However, to the detriment of the system, they want to continue that rather than teach you how to get beyond it. And so they deal with the symptoms, not the core.
Right. And, you know, I was told I was the worst kind of addict and that I had the highest chance of overdosing. And for a while that like crippled me. I was like, oh my God, I don't have a chance.
Right.
Like, and so
I don't know. Into it.
Right. Because I have, you know, mental health professionals telling me this. I had a prosecutor.
Yeah, they know more than I do. So I should accept what they know because they're experts. And I'm like, you know, I had the same thing that happened to me. And bottom line, that's bullshit.
Yeah. You know, the prosecutor.
Why do we accept and have to be put through the kind of, protracted belligerence of that kind of thinking?
Yeah, the prosecutor literally said in open court that my trauma was so bad I would never get clean. And you know what? I did get clean. I just needed a little help. I just needed a little guidance. I just needed a fair chance. And, you know, having healthcare, that's barely even a fair chance. Like it was so hard to still, you know, maintain sobriety. And I had every wrong diagnosis and just people with PhDs not listening to me because I have mental health issues. And
I used to call them educated idiots.
Right.
Some of them are really sharp, right? We got to give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
There are those entrenched, even clinical-based psychiatry, right? That gets stuck in the DSM-5, I guess it is now, maybe even 6. I don't know. However, that's just full of diagnoses from symptoms rather than you know, analysis and attempts to work with in order to help the patient deal with and integrate, develop a better sense of themselves and understanding how they operate. Well, a neurodiverse person in the first place is not understandable with the current views. It's like, you know, trying to solve problems with the same thinking that made them. It doesn't work.
Right.
You got to step back and ask the problem questions, not think you know the solution and try and, you know, supplant it for whatever it is that they're asking for. It pays. Now, how do you see that in your life and others around you and yourself of understanding that piece of, you know, everybody's slightly different and they deserve to be acknowledged and at least attempted to be understood?
Exactly. And, you know, I got so tired of all of these doctors. It's like, you know what? I did it your way for 20 years. And for 20 years, you couldn't even figure out what was wrong with me. So I'm going to stop believing everything you say, and I'm going to go on my own experience because I've been right every time. Nobody wanted to listen to me, and I didn't even want to listen to me because I'm sitting there doubting myself because I got these people.
You talk to yourself often, and do you respond? Well, I hope that you do, right? If we don't talk to ourselves, who else are we going to talk to? We've got, now the thing is to be able to let that out every once in a while, right, and have a discussion with another that at least understands who you are,
right,
and then can help you, you know, manage the conversation a little bit better.
Right.
We're still going to have them. That's our nature. And I think we get embarrassed when they spill out, and we try to have conversations with others about what's going on inside our heads because we think we're going to sound nuts.
Right.
And like for me, being put back in the institution, right? For you, same thing.
Yeah.
There's that fear of, am I going to say the right thing in the wrong place, and the white coats are going to take me away? Oh, ha, ha, he, right? That was my adoptive father's worst fear. At 82 years old, we finally had a conversation. I was a 32nd degree Mason, so I thought that we could have these spiritual conversations, right, about what I was experiencing. Never happened.
He was a Mason and he still did that?
Well, I think he was, ultimately, I think he was working or looking out for my best interest, because he thought if we had those conversations, it would give me permission to be more open about them. And he knew what it had caused as a 19-year-old, right, where I got institutionalized, even by his choice. Still, in that process, though.
So I'm going to put you through it to prevent someone else from putting you through
it. Well, no, he put it through me again to begin with, and then saw how it affected me and was fearful that it would happen again because I'd opened my mouth up in the wrong place. And he finally revealed this to me, and we were sitting in the car looking across the first tee of the golf course I grew up on. And he says, you know, I was just deathly afraid you'd say the wrong thing, the right place, and they'd come take you away. And I said, well, Dad, I've been in Phoenix for 35 years. I'm still free. I think I made it.
Right.
And he kind of chuckled, and yet there was so much that I missed that I would have loved to have had he not held that bias.
Right.
And just been open and conversant with me. At least explore. You know, I know he didn't have all the answers. I didn't have all the answers. I don't know who does. Infinite intelligence does, right?
Yeah.
All that is has those answers, but you got to ask the right questions in order for the answers to come. And those answers may come from a person, an experience, a book, a movie, you know, just one of those moments where something clicks and it's like, oh, got it. That was the memo. So how do you receive the memos now? What's your life like in how you're moving forward and paying attention to these other gifts that you have and being able to work with those a little more effectively?
Well, I connect with nature a lot. Like, you know, if I go outside, no shoes on, and I sit really, really still and just, you know, tune everything out. I can feel the vibrations, you know, of the earth. And, you know, I meditate a lot, and I try to just, you know, work on myself. Like, I want to, you know, get my vibration up there. I want to be like so in control of, you know, myself and my emotions and my mental health. Like,
I would offer that you got to be so out of control to be in, right? Because there's no.
I already was out of control, right?
Yeah, it's a flow. Now, when you're in that place and you're meditating, you're grounded and you're silent, do you hear a sound?
Yes, I get ringing in my ears all the time, or like sometimes it hurts though. Like sometimes the ringing in my ears and the sounds, like it really hurts. And, you know, other times I will see like, it kind of looks like glitter, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, little weird, you know, lights and, you know, shadowy, you know, stuff like that. Like that
Mm-hmm.
happens to me a lot. And I'll see things right before they happen. Like I won't realize it was, you know, premonition like until
Pre-con.
after.
Yeah, you're
Right.
sensitive. Well, everything's waveform, right? And information exchange, and as things are happening, you're going to get some impressions, or some people are going to feel those impressions because they're there. And
Right.
some are built differently than others in their sensitivity to them. Not a bad thing, kind of spooky, and can be spooky cool once you get comfortable with, okay, this is something that happens to me. It's a direct experience. I don't have to be concerned about it. I'm not crazy. Others are like me. You know, that's why
Right.
I mentioned the octopus movement earlier, is that it's a neurodiverse organization of nonlinear thinkers. And,
Right.
you know, the spectrum people, right?
Right.
Um, it's like a home. It's like, you know, people finding each other, and the nuances in conversations, the, you know, what might really offend a linear thinker, like being interrupted mid sentence, right,
Yeah.
would not offend a nonlinear thinker, because that's how they operate. That, you know, there's chunks of information and they can be tangential in an instant and
Right.
still come back to where that central focus was. And that's tough to deal with, and hard to track if you're not built that way, or at least understand that neurodiverse people operate that way. And that's a really big challenge in business and industry, because
Right.
you know, these people are brilliant at what they do.
They're just not, you know, when it comes to the corporate and the marketing, they might be a little bit, you know, but that it's weird though, because I'm actually really good at marketing.
Mm.
Like you know, I learned how to, you know, do that with a cleaning company that I worked for. And I became very good at marketing, like going to marketing meetings and like connecting with people. Like I was actually very good at that. But I remember feeling like I was being inauthentic because, you know, I'd always ask them questions that I really didn't care about, and like they ate it right up. And it's like I feel like they know that you know, or they should know that I really don't care about, you know, all that small talk stuff, but it's like they eat it up. And that's what I don't get about, you know, neurotypical people. They would rather have, you know, a false
They love to
sense
have
of,
conversations about small stuff.
yeah, it's agonizing.
Mm. Agreed. Agreed. Um, and yet, when you know, here's an example, or maybe an opportunity, is in those situations where there are things coming up. Well, it gives you a chance just to be quiet, kind of feel them out, watch the energy where it's going, not have to say a thing, and just wait for the opportunity, even request an opening that allows, you know, a really neat segue that allows you to bring up a topic that you wanted to talk about.
Right.
I would challenge you to try that, right? Just be quiet. And it'll give you an example of how centered, purposeful, and responsive your environment can be to it, including other people, right? Just try
Yeah.
that sometime. Just be quiet,
Okay.
still centered, find that happy place in you, and maybe a little bit giddy about something really cool that's going to happen that you don't know what it is.
Right.
That kind of anticipatory feeling, and see what happens.
Yeah.
I guarantee you it will blow your mind,
I
because it
believe it.
works. So for others like yourself that find themselves in you know, horrible situations, and seemingly no way out, what kind of advice can you give to them to help nurture themselves, first of all, and to develop the courage to continue to find help?
You know, especially now in America, everybody is struggling with something. So don't just assume that you're the only one dealing with it. I felt like I was the only person in my situation. And then I get locked up and I meet so many women who have it 10 times worse. And I didn't even like want to cry or, feel sorry for myself after that, after seeing how the horrible things
Sure.
they were going through. And, laughter makes the pain go down easier. And, I used to worry myself to death, and stop focusing on what you don't want. If something's making you angry and that's not what you want, don't think about it. Choose something that makes you happy and laugh. And even if it's like complete nonsense, it's better than focusing on the negative. And I know that sounds so cliche, but my life didn't change till I was able to, focus, on what I wanted.
You made the choice to better
right.
yourself. You made the choice to actually love you.
Yes. And I stopped listening to other people's biases and stigmas, even if they had, a PhD. Like if something's not
You're willing
working
to challenge
for you,
authority is what I hear you saying.
I was willing to challenge authority, and I've been defiant my whole life. I mean, geez, my first experience with a banned book was in jail, and my friend was trying to order some banned books of the Bible. They wouldn't let her have it and wouldn't give her any type of reason why, just said it was on the banned list. And so naturally, I had to read all of them when I got out.
Oh, sure.
Right. And
yeah, beware. Well, okay, I'll beware, right?
And I had kind of found Christ in jail, and I was strictly kind of sticking to the Bible because that's all they gave us there.
Well, it's
and
much
so
more than that.
Once I got out and I read all those books, I was like, oh my God, they lied. They've been lying to us just to enslave us for centuries.
Millennia.
Yeah. I'm like, and then I got really angry about it, and I was just like totally anti-Christian for a little bit. And I'm anti-religion.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I've been there. However,
I love the Christ conscious though. I love what he did, and I love Mary Magdalene, and
that's the embodiment of love, right?
Yes.
That everything's possible to those who believe and be as little children. You got to be in that naive, innocent little child place when you're dealing with infinite intelligence, because you're much smaller.
Right.
and it will respond, right? Now, in that organizational structure, I think that happens. That's the normal course of what has been happening in organizations because of the patriarchal and competitive nature of the ego.
Yeah.
Right. Now that's changing as we go into the age of Aquarius. We've been through the winter solstice of 2012, the tipping point of the rise of consciousness and awareness. And now that we've got that, we're carrying it. So we take it everywhere with us. And what we do anywhere, we do everywhere, whether we realize it or not. So this energy that we carry then affects others, and there's a trickle down or ripple through, depending on how you look at it, the rest of humanity. And it's such a subtle energy that they don't even feel it. And yet, because of it, all of the things that are incongruent with loving and being loved are coming up to the surface now for us. That's plainly obvious, right? The manipulation of the systems, the infighting in political organizations, the use of the resources in order to manipulate, manage, and control resources through war, all of these kinds of things that have been known for a while, but now it's coming up to the surface where it's all exposed thanks to the internet.
Yep, and they're panicking. So now they're going to enslave women and do all these other crazy things.
Well, I think it's beyond that now, though.
Yeah.
There's that, because that's still part of the old school. And unfortunately, it's still present. We haven't fully come out of that yet.
Right. It's clinging on for dear life.
With a death grip, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. And yet there's this freeing new energy. It feels really weird. My wife and I have been noticing it, just they almost feel like you're not quite in your body all the time.
Oh my God. That happened to me right before I got on with you. And I was like, oh my God, I hope
Sorry
I
about that.
I was literally feeling that way. I was like trying to like gain a thought and, you know, get my thoughts together, and I couldn't do it. And I was like,
Well, it kind of freaked her out because it does feel, it's like
wobbly.
not quite there, wobbly, right? I call it kind of sloshy, right? And this has happened to me for decades, so I know about it. I'm used to it. I have some theories about what it really is.
Right.
Because it all, you know, I've studied it and considered and asked questions and investigated for so long that there's only certain things it can be. And Occam's razor is really true, right? When you consider the energy shifts, the waves of energy that we get from solar radiation, from EMPs or electromagnetic pulses, and everything's already set up on electromagnetic spectrum. So as these ripples of energy goes through it, what's a subtle energy body going to do? They're going to feel it.
Right.
And it's going to cause them to go, ooh, for a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I kept thinking it was like brain damage or something. I thought it was like that old injury kicking in.
I did too initially, and no, and my wife's had a stroke, so she was really concerned about that.
We're all gaslighting ourselves into this.
Right. Well, yeah, we love castigation, right? Self-castigation, especially, right? It's like self-deprecation. We just love it. We thrive on it. And yet there's a language in that we need to change. We need to be self-explorative, self-empowering, self-acknowledging, self-accepting.
Right.
Especially
self-forgiving.
Yes.
That's been the hardest one for me. Like, you know, self-forgiveness and just forgiveness in general. Like, it's just, sometimes it's like easier to remain angry, and then you don't have to like face the fact how hurt and like betrayed and you were.
Right. Well, and speaking of hurt and betrayed, you're going to feel this way because we've got to close.
Right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for being so authentic and open and honest and vulnerable in sharing what you've gone through and how that has helped you and others that are going to be listening shortly. I appreciate who you are, Beth, and
thank you for having me.
Best and much success to you. And
thank you. You too.
Thank you. And namaste and la catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.